Hello and welcome to the 13th lecture of the series, Struggle of PhD Life, Myths versus Truths. I personally believe that this is one of the most important lectures in this series because it just does not show you what to expect in PhD life in terms of struggle, but it also busts some myths. So don't worry, it's not just full of some dreadful statistics and terrible stories about PhD students. It's about what questions to ask before PhD, what goes on during PhD, and what actually happens after you complete your PhD. And also you will be with a PI, meaning a professor under the supervision of a professor, and what to expect from them, how are they in real life. And I will also try to give answer to some of the questions, like how to utilize the knowledge of your professor to your advantage and how to get rid of toxic people so that you can utilize your time effectively. And a lot of the time you will be under a significant amount of stress and you will be emotional, possibly mentally helpless, and how to handle this kind of situation. And also I will try to answer how to balance between PhD and social life. And at the end, I will try to show you how to know what the professor wants and how to fulfill your objectives during PhD. So let's first come to the phase of before PhD. What generally prospective grad students ask is that, can I just manage fund? Can I somehow get into the grad school? And how much will I make in terms of remuneration or fund? What we should actually ask is that I will spend 5 years of my time with a PI and perform research with him or her. Is my supervisor a good person, and is he or she a good mentor? And also you should know what are the requirements of finishing PhD from this particular lab, how many projects you should complete, or how many publications do you need. And also you should know the trajectory of your PI, like you should follow the careers of his or her current and past students who have already graduated and where they are placed right now. Are they doing good in industry or academia? Are they teaching in top schools? Are they getting good jobs with good salaries? And also you should ask yourself whether you can make a long-term commitment. It's very easy to get into a grad school and get frustrated after just one semester. So if you cannot make a long-term commitment, probably doing PhD is not a good idea yet. So you should be mentally prepared before doing a PhD. And you should know that 5 years, 4 or 5 years of time is actually a long time. And many things will happen during this time, like probably you will get married, you will have a kid, possibly a family member of you will get sick, or probably you will get sick, and God forbid, possibly a family member of you will pass away. So how would you handle this kind of critical events? How do you respond to this kind of critical events? And do you have the mental ability to still stand up and continue your PhD? You should really ask these questions before coming to PhD. And also, aside from these general questions, you should ask situational questions, like what to do in this scenario. Let's say you are making no progress. Your professor is very friendly, but you're making no progress in 2 or 3 years, whether you should continue this PhD. And possibly your professor is very rude and abusive, and your relationship with him or her is not very good, whether you should continue. And possibly after starting to do your PhD, you have found out that your field is not that prospective, whether you should continue. And possibly you have got multiple opportunities in other labs, whether you should continue in your current position. And possibly you have found that the coursework or the research requirements or the deadlines are too tough to handle for you, whether you should continue or not. You should ask these kind of situational questions, because Sooner or later, at any stage of your PhD, these questions may arise. Now let's come to what goes on during PhD. It's like parenting your projects, and you will find out that nights will be long, but years will be short. It means that if you count your day-to-day struggles, how you are having a hard time managing your projects or running your experiments, you will find that it's really, really difficult. But in no time, you will find out that 1 or 2 years have already passed, and you should never. That's why you should never focus on how much time you're spending behind your projects. Rather, you should have long-term and short-term goals, and you should be focusing on completing your day-to-day tasks associated with your projects. And also, if you just become very sad about not having the PhD defense yet, you'll be very frustrated throughout your PhD. So you should focus on project completion, not the PhD defense. PhD defense will come eventually when you get to finish sufficient amount of projects. And one thing to divert your mind from this kind of problematic questions like, why am I not defending my PhD yet? Or when am I going to finish my PhD? Is to focus on today's task, which I'm saying repetitively, because that's how it works. That works best. If you are focused on today's work, or if you can ask yourself whether you have made something better today in terms of methodology or approaching a research question, then you will find out that you are no longer sad. You are focused on today's task, which is due to being very small scale, it's easier to accomplish. And let's come to what happens after PhD. And here are some situations that I have given. Our peers, our colleagues, our family, generally they say these things like when we're in high school, they say high school graduation is the most important part of your life. When we're in college, they say that finishing college is the most important part of your life. And when we're applying to grad schools, they say that getting into grad school is the most important. After that, you don't have to worry about anything. And when we do PhD, our peers say that finishing PhD is the most important part of your life. The truth is that none of the above is true. Nothing is most important in your life. Everything is important up to a certain extent, and everything is part of a continuous process that you have to go through. And you should always actively think about your trajectory and your circle, your peers, your colleagues and your friends, the circle and the network that you are maintaining. Let's say you get into academia after finishing your PhD. Your path does not end there, rather it begins there. You will face pressure of getting tenure and getting grant if you go into academia. If you go into industry position, you have to get promotions and better salary. You will have pressure from around you to get into a higher position, like a manager position or a leader position or a project lead position. And also in your social life, there will be tremendous amount of peer pressure, like about have you bought a house, how new or how fancy your house is, what's your car model, that sort of parameters will come into play. And again, I'm mentioning that this is a continuous process and it never ends. So you should not focus on when and how it will end. Rather, you should be focusing on playing the game. In other words, you should focus on the journey, not the destination, because there isn't one. Now, here comes the most exciting part of the lecture. I'm sharing some real experience of my PhD, and I will discuss on 5 points obtained from my PhD life, and also from some shared experience of my peers, friends, and some known and unknown people who have gone through the struggles of PhD life. The first point is that your professor will change you, as you will be actively associated with him for 5 years of your life, at least 5 years of your life, his or her thinking process and methodology and characteristics and attribute and behavior, everything will affect you, and you will perceive things differently at the end of your PhD because of the effect of your professor. And here I'm showing 4 case studies. First one is that one student had an abusive professor, and he was so abusive that he did not give enough money, but put tremendous pressure in terms of workload on his student. So that student initially had the intention to go into the academia to become a professor, but this kind of abusive behavior and tremendous pressure actually changed his perspective, and he pursued industry instead of academia. And in other words, we have lost a potential professor. The case study 2 is that one student had an inactive professor, meaning that that professor did not have any push, did not give any deadlines or anything. So his student had to finish PhD by his own, and it was not a very good experience. And he said that if he had an active professor, probably his PhD would be more fruitful. Number 3 is that there was an unresponsive professor, meaning at the very beginning of his student's PhD life, he said that I will not be able to help you in anything. You have to finish everything by yourself. I will not give any input. So what happened is that the student, realizing that he will not get any help, he mastered all the required skills and learned all the tools and become very experienced in his field. He mastered all the tools by himself. And at the end, he managed to get a very lucrative industry position. And the 4th is that there was an unhelpful and rude professor who did not help much. So his student got into industry, but what happened beside this is that she started spreading toxicity in social networks about PhD life, which may mislead some students, according to my opinion. So you can see that apparently good situations in a lab may lead to a bad result in terms of the student's perspective, and even and also vice versa. Apparently a bad situation may lead to apparently a bad situation may have some silver linings. So these are the real world case studies that I'm showing you to justify the fact that your professor will change you significantly. And that's why you should invest time in choosing a mentor. Number 2 is that a lot of prospective grad students start PhD thinking that the professor is an opponent. The truth is that you can actually utilize your professor's knowledge to your advantage. To do that, you have to communicate regularly with your professor, and you should not take your professor as an opponent. Rather, you should take your professor as a person who has spent significant amount of time in the field of academia. So he or she is a very knowledgeable person. And if you communicate outside your project, a lot of the students do not communicate at all outside their project. They do not talk about anything else other than sharing data. So in order to utilize your professor's knowledge, you should discuss about the trajectory, career track, timing, and real picture of the field that you are working in, because PI's work is to handle students, and a PI can tell better than anyone else what is actually good for the student. And also, we should not overemphasize the good things about professors. We should not ignore the negativities, but we should always try to manage, because it's a two-way communication between a professor and student. And at the end of the day, it's true that you can utilize the professor's knowledge up to some extent. Number three is that during this long time of PhD, in the period of 5 years, there will be a lot of toxic people who will hinder your progress in one way or the other. For example, if you do not have a discussion with yourself when taking an important decision, rather, if you always go to your friend, the outcome can be good or bad. A good friend will always talk about solution, so you should always go to those kind of friends, and you should always recognize what your friend is saying. Some friends will, when you go to them with any problem regarding PhD life struggles, they will start abusing the professor verbally. They will also get emotional, and also sometimes they will say frightening and threatening things and terrible things. These are all bad signs in terms of a friend, and you should avoid these kind of toxicities. Number four is that when doing PhD, you will have to finish deadlines regularly. You'll be under a lot of stress, and sometimes you will be very emotional. So there are some do's and don'ts in these kind of situations. The don'ts are, sometimes we are very much preoccupied on showing off our study, rather doing the actual study or the actual PhD work or research work. And sometimes we are very much proud of our struggling. We share everything about our struggle, our PhD struggle in social network. We have to update about everything, whether we are working late hour, whether we are working for 12 hours at a stretch, something like that. And at the end of the day, these hurt us badly because things do not go well always in PhD. And that's why we should limit this kind of parameters in our life in order to effectively utilize our time and resources. The do's are that you should always ask yourself whether you have approached your project a better way today, and whether you have learned something new today, and whether you have been able to optimize your projects today. PhD is Doctor of Philosophy, but it's actually about managing and optimizing your time and resources. And you should always remember that you have to be in good terms with your PIs and peers and colleagues and collaborators. And the main objective is to complete your projects. And you should always be actively thinking about, or you should always be visualizing your trajectory, whether you want to go to the academia or industry. One of the most daunting challenges in PhD life is balancing between research and social life. There are, in your campus life, you will hear about several legends throughout your PhD life, like some student didn't go home for 5 years, they just worked and worked. Some people worked like machines, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And also you will hear some negative, exaggerated statements like some students didn't work at all, but got away with it because they communicate well. And you should avoid spending too much time listening to these kind of legends, because most of them are not true, and a lot of them are very much exaggerated. And at the end of the day, what we want a combination of a happy social life. We want to get enough sleep. We want to have all our projects in line, and we want to have a sense of accomplishment. Having all of these at the same time is practically impossible. So what you have to do is that you have to balance, you have to manage, and you have to optimize your projects, and you have to come up with a solution of how you can have a social life and how you can successfully complete your PhD. In order to do that, you can try this three-step approach. One is prioritization. What do you have to do today at first? You should make a list. And in terms of short term and long term, you should make a list. And you should segment your goals into manageable tasks so that the tasks themselves are not very daunting. A project at a whole project might seem very daunting, but if you segment it into manageable tasks, it becomes very, very easy to accomplish within a reasonable amount of time. And the third step is bookkeeping. If you bookkeep, if you track your accomplishments and your progresses regularly, you can see that within a few months, you have accomplished so much, you have completed so many tasks, and not only it will give you a sense of accomplishment, you can also have the ability to modify it according to the needs and deadline. So that's why you should try this three-step approach, which has actually helped me for so many years. Number 5 is about what the professor wants. Sometimes we as PhD students do not know what the professor wants, and we are not in the same page with the professor. You should understand that your perspective is not equal to your professor's perspective. Your perspective is kind of narrow as a PhD student because your objective is to finish your PhD. You think about your project, getting a publication, something like that. But your professor's perspective is kind of broader, and he is thinking about how to use your result to write a grant, how to continue the existing grant, how to teach some courses in this semester, and many other services associated with the faculty position. So you are an important but small subset of his perspective. So your perspective is kind of like looking through a hole in a wall, but a professor's perspective is like looking into something from a roof, which is very vast and diverse. And also you have to take this into consideration that a professor is a human with a personal life. Aside from this huge task, aside from the huge amount of tasks that a professor handles, like the academic and research and services and teaching, these kind of responsibilities are on him or her. Aside from that, he or she has a personal life, a family, and he or she also has to maintain these parameters also. Therefore, you will never find your solution if you are preoccupied with what the professor is thinking. Therefore, you should focus on your tasks, how to accomplish them according to the professor's given assignments. And one thing is for sure, that your eyes will also evolve throughout the PhD life. In first year, your vision will be very blurry and very narrow. But in last year, you will start to see things differently, and also you will have a broader sense. And after PhD, you will have an entirely different sense of perceiving things in terms of career goals. So that's how you can be in the same page of the professor and complete your PhD by being in good terms with him or her. And at the end of this lecture, I'd like to give some disclaimers that these are the real world experiences that are shared from multiple people who have gone through a PhD life. And you have probably recognized that the lectures are about what to expect and how to handle situations, but it's not about how to solve everything. I'm not giving you a solution to everything, because solving problems is what a PhD student does. So I hope that these real world insights actually will help you performing your tasks as a PhD student. Thanks.